All right, thanks for coming in tonight. My name is Simon. I'm the dev manager for Crack.com. How many people here has heard of Crack.com? Besides the media people. All right, so for those of you that don't know Crack.com, it's a comedy website, currently the #1 comedy site. Yeah, Crack.com. We used to have a magazine, which is interesting.
Yes, yeah, I read it when I was a kid.
See, there's a lot of memory in that. We actually do keep a stash of all the old magazines still around. Every single publication is still there. So there's a lot of interesting articles that we produce every single day, and we have a wide range of audiences that come to our site, visit every day, and we have a lot of traffic. So one of the things that we adopted about I would say about 3-4 years ago is Kohana Framework. It was a huge initiative amongst all the developers here, and it actually turned out to be really suitable for what we do. So today, I want to do a general coverage of what Kohana is and how to use it, and share a few tips and tricks and some gotchas that we ran into as we progress with Kohana Framework. So first of all, this is a quick introduction of what Kohana is. It's an elegant HMVC PHP 5 framework. So how many people are familiar with MVC? All right, so I don't have to go over that then. But anyway, so currently the stable version is sitting at 3.3.2, and so there's a few topics I want to cover. So foundation of Kohana Framework. So how it's made, well, not really how it's made, but what actually drives Kohana Framework. Setting up Kohana, which is important. You want to know how to get it up and running on your site, and how Crack.com uses Kohana. And finally, scalability with Kohana Framework. As you grow your website, the more traffic you take, you want to be able to make sure that your servers can handle all the traffic. So let's get into each of the topics. So the first thing, foundation of Kohana Framework. What makes Kohana a great framework? So first of all, it's based on HMVC design pattern. It's got cascading file system. I'll go into each of the bullet point in a minute here. And it's got a routing system, a really nice validation module that's built in. And as I talk about module, there's also modules. The whole system of the whole Kohana is about modules. Like everything is designed as modules. And finally, there's minion. And if you don't know what a minion is for Kohana, we'll get to that. All right. So what is HMVC? So it's kind of like if you think about it, this is an advanced or extension of MVC framework. In the traditional MVC framework, all you have is controller, model, and view, right? So what HMVC actually did is that instead of actually having just controller, model, and view, it can have a hierarchy system. So which means that one controller, as it's running, taking a request, it can call subsequent controller to run to grab whatever is necessary for the output. So for example, let's say if you have a page, the request comes in, and you need to grab the view for the comments. Instead of actually, traditionally you will have, let's say you have article, blog, 2 different pages, you will have comments basically run in a model for both of, in both article and blog model, which is very inefficient. So in a way that you end up, bending the framework backwards, basically writing your own kind of libraries to support the models that you're building based on the framework. So what Kohana has, so what HMVC has achieved is that instead of creating these libraries on your own, you could just use another control, MVC structure to create your comments. So to output, let's say, only the chunk of the comments of view. So now in your main request to request for the article, it could actually trigger a subsequent request to an internal controller of comments and grab the comments view out and display that. So it's very convenient to have a hierarchy system like this. And next, we have cascading file system. So this is, for some other frameworks, you probably have, experience with this before. But so what cascading file system is nice about is that this is, so basically it has a sequence of how it loads files. So if anyone familiar with PHP autoloaders? Okay, so for those that don't know about PHP autoloaders, so So in PHP, if you want to declare or instantiate a new class, what you need to do is you first need to require that class or include that class in the file at the top of your PHP file. Otherwise, it doesn't know where to look for that, where that class is declared. So in PHP, there's also a thing called an autoloader. So what you can do is you can program and say, anytime I try to instantiate a new class, here are the paths that PHP should go look for that specific file that can potentially match to to have the declaration of your class. So what cascading file system did is that it basically overwrites or overloads the autoloader, basically saying that Kohana will read through 4 major pieces of sections of its system. So you have the system, and then you can see there's the module database, module comment. So basically there's system, application, and finally module. So where the system lays is where the core of Kohana implementations are. So you can have, in the system, you have cookie implementation, encryption, error handling. All of those are in there. That's the core of Kohana. That's what the Kohana framework is built. The application layer is where you actually can put in your own application-specific implementations. Like, for cookie, for example, if you want to override what cookie actually, how the salt is in the cookie, you can actually do it in the application layer. You don't have to go all the way down to the system level. And then finally, you have the modules level, which is then you can implement small modules that's not specifically tied to your application that becomes portable. So in there, you can also have things that overwrites whatever that application has done. So if you have, let's say, cookie.php in system level, and you can have another implementation in application level of cookie.php, and if one specific module needs to make a very specific change or a very specific implementation of cookies, and it can do that in the modules as well. So what Kohana will read is, do I have cookie.php in system? Yes, I do. Okay, should I load it? No, let's keep looking. Does application layer has it? If it does, okay, well, we keep looking until we finish all the lookups to the modules level. If I don't have any cookies.php left, then it's just going to end up to load the cookie.php. Let's say I don't have any modules, then it will resort in cookie.php application layer. So in this graph, it's basically showing that the lookups from system, application, modules, all of those eventually merge into this is what the Kohana is going to look for, where the files are. And so what's really nice about this is if the system level is where the Kohana core is at, you don't have to modify it, really. So you can modify it on an application level or modify it on a modules level to however way you want, but you're not touching the core of Kohana. So a lot of times, in other frameworks or any other applications, what you end up with, you start making small modifications. Eventually, you end up with a version of that piece of code that's completely not adaptable with whatever that software is advancing. So you're, let's say, 1.0, and all of a sudden that software has updated to 2.0. You try to grab it from GitHub, good luck. You have a bunch of hacks in your code, right? So with this cascading file system is, if I don't touch the system level stuff, and I only make changes in the application and modules, if I ever need to upgrade Kohana, I can actually just upgrade the system, which is where the core is. Everything else, I just make little changes if needed. Let's say major changes in versions, some conventions changes. I need to make little changes, but at least I'm safe from upgrade health, right? Yeah. So it's so you shouldn't the goal is you shouldn't really touch the core directly. You should be doing all your implementation above the core. All right. So routing. So this is an interesting topic. So a lot of frameworks nowadays try to do routing. If you look at the latest framework, Laravel also has its own routing, which is very, in a way is very similar to how Kohana does. I know this is a lot of text. I'm going to try to make it as interesting as possible. So Kohana routing, so it provides a really easy way to direct requests to a specific controller. So in the old days, when there is no frameworks out there, you have to design your own framework, or you just want to try out MVC. What you end up with is a whole bunch of files sitting in your docs folder. Let's say user.php, shopping cart.php, which is basically serving as controllers or the endpoint where a user will come in. So what the routing did is it directs all traffic through a routing system. So all the requests through a routing system, it will match the patterns that you predefined. So the routing system, it actually supports regex patterns. Everyone knows what a regular expression is, right? Okay, good. So with regex pattern matching, what you have is a much more powerful way of routing. So you don't have a just specific /article something something. It can do /article dot star or asterisk, and it will match any patterns like that. Very similar to htaccess's mod rewrites. But this is actually done implemented directly in Kohana that you can use right away. And what's also really cool about Kohana routing is besides just regex pattern matching, it also supports subpatterns and optional subpatterns. So for example, if you have two different types of URLs for articles. For example, you have an article that paginates. There's 3 pages, right? The first page, you don't want to have the pagination P1 in there. So you can just do /article blah, 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 .html. And then within the same regex pattern, you can do an optional and say _P1.html. P2.html, or where the integer you can actually replace with regex. So what that does is, so all these variations will all direct to the same controller that you specify. So it makes it really simple. Instead of defining 2 different kinds of URL that to the same place, you can define just one. And here's some tips and gotchas that we ran into. So for example, routes are matched in the order they're added, similar to .htaccess rewrite rules work. How many people are familiar with .htaccess rewrite rule? Okay, so basically what happens is .htaccess rewrite rules will stop at the first thing it matches. It will not keep going. Same thing with routes. If it finds a match, it will not keep going. So if you start defining, let's say, a catch-all type of route, you probably want to keep it all the way at the bottom because you want all the special routes to be matched first before it gets to the catch-all. A hard lesson learned on our end. The other thing is routes can be defined in init.php of each module. So in each Kohana module, you can actually have an init.php. Think about it as bootstrapping that module. So you can run a bunch of initializations on the module. One of the nice things is you can actually keep the routes in the module. So, which makes it really portable. So let's say I have articles, blogs, some other sections of my site, right? And I keep them in the modules. If I want to turn off one section, all I need to do is take that module out of my code base, and all of a sudden the routes are gone with it. So they don't exist anymore. They can go to 404. I mean.
Is there a particular way to set up a particular order of these modules and initialize?
Yes. So in bootstrap.php of Kohana, so you will the way that you define your modules is you tell Kohana in what order that you want your modules to be loaded. So it's also important to know, because if you have init.php in all of those modules defining your routes, and you just randomly place these modules in your definition in Bootstrap, and what's going to happen is you're going to run into the situation we ran into is, some route.
If your catch-all is too high,
right, if you have a catch-all way too high. Let's say you have a module that handles 500 and 404, and you put it all the way up. I'm sorry, your whole site is going to go to 404, right? Which is no good. So here's an example of how the route is set up. I know this seems a little bit complicated, but this is the default route that Kohana ships with for you to play with. But this is kind of one of those catch-all type of route where everything in parentheses in Kohana's routing is optional. So basically, if you see this parenthesis and this parenthesis, meaning that you don't even have to pass anything on your URL. Just hit the domain. It's going to go to this controller, a controller welcome and action index. But if you do pass in the controller, you don't have to pass in action either, because it's going to go. So it doesn't matter what you do here. It's going to go here. So it's a catch-all type of routing, and one of those things you want to keep all the way in the bottom. All right, so validation, escape from if and else hell. How many people here has run into situations where your logics, when you try to write some if and else logics, end up writing a lot of if and else and a lot of closing brackets? Yeah, I see a few hands. Yeah, don't lie. It happens. So one of the frustrating thing is sometimes you run into business rules where you have to check multiple values of different variables, and they have many different combinations. And what you end up with is if this blah blah blah, and then another if inside of it, another if nested inside, and you keep going with if and else if and all that, and eventually you end up with a really messy code. So here's an example. So let's say I have two variables. Variable A is value of 1, 2, 3. B is ABC, string ABC. So I want to check if A is set and A is also a numeric, and I also want to check, make sure that B is set and also is a string. So what you end up with is this messy, huge block of if statement, and use your imagination. The more things that I need to check, the longer this is going to be. So this is a version of the validation module that's shipped with Kohana, which is extremely awesome because now you can actually define all the validation rules, and then at the end you can just do a valid check. So let's see what we're doing here. So all I need to do is declare validation factory. It's a factory pattern, and a passing A and B as and tag them as A and B. So I add a rule and say A should not be empty, and add another rule, A should be numeric, and then B is not empty as well. And also I add another one saying B should be an array of blot and ABC, meaning that B can be either blot or ABC. Once I've done this block, and I can keep going with the rules if I needed to. Once I'm done with this, all I need to do is run this function called valid check. It's going to return me either true or false. So it's going to run through all of these logics for me without doing any of these. And you can write this as pretty as you want because it's all chainable. So if I actually break right here, and I can just do valid, pointer, rule, and I can keep going on one line at a time. So, use your imagination how beautiful your code is going to be. So, so that's extremely useful, especially in the web space. We all know never trust the user input, right? So you want to do validation. So you're going to run into a lot of that, and with this, you can actually do a lot. So as you can see, the not empty is simple. Is numeric is actually a PHP native function, right? And in array is also a native PHP function where you can actually use all the native PHP functions, even though Kohana might not have the documentation around, these are the things that we support. They only list a handful of them, but you can actually go beyond that. Just use any of the built-in functions. And matter of fact, if you make a function of your own, you can do this too. You can pass your own function signature here.
Can you set a path or whatever? How do you make sure it's calling your function? Do you have to use a unique name?
Yeah. So unfortunately, that's the thing where you have to have a unique name for it. So yeah, escape from if and I'm sorry.
There's one optimization. Instead of an array A B, you can use a compact A B or something like that.
I'm sorry.
You can use instead of like doing array A equals A, B equals B,
Mm-hmm.
compact.
Right.
And a quick question also, like you assign those variables by like when you initialize it, like when you associate in the app object with the factory, can you add those objects there like afterwards?
Yeah, you could. So if I just break, you mean right here, right?
So no, I mean like I can create like a rule set, for instance, and then say like just throw a variable.
That I have to check. I'm not too sure.
So it's kind of like the opposite.
Right. That I'm not too sure. I have to check on that one, but that's a good question. Cool. So let's move on to the next one. Modules. So as I mentioned earlier, the nice thing about Kohana is modules. It provides lots of modules, and you can write your own modules. And out of the box, Kohana already ships a bunch of really useful but optional modules. There's authentication. You can do simple login, logout, user authentication, cache. It's a common interface for caching engines. So on crack.com, what we do is we use Redis for our caching. So we just use the Kohana's caching module and extended that to connect to our Redis instances. So it's pretty convenient to have. CodeBench, a very powerful benchmark tool. The author of this is actually not a core developer of Kohana. It's actually contributed by a user. And it's really useful. Database, it provides a really neat database module. It can do PDO, it can do native MySQL connections. And you can actually set up different schemas for your database configuration. You can have master, slave, you know. And an image, so a powerful image manipulation module built on GD library. So you can do resizing of the images. You can do you know, some basic manipulations to the image. Minion, yes, banana. How many people have seen Despicable Me? Okay, never mind then. All right. It's the result of having 2 kids, I'm sorry. ORM, love it or hate it. I know I don't want to get into the debate of whether ORM is right for a specific application or not. There's a lot of lovers out there of ORM, and there's a lot of haters of it. It's actually a, I'm sorry?
Is it specific ORM, or is it so is it kind of native Kohana?
Right, Kohana actually ships an ORM module that you can optionally use. Okay, yeah, I'll pass the mic. So yeah, Kohana does ship with the ORM, makes it really easy if you want to implement your model, you know, extending the ORM, and all of a sudden you have your, you know, access to the database and all that. But you know, on Crack we chose not to use it because with ORM, you know, from our standpoint of view, sometimes it gets harder for us to do special things. So we resorted not to use that. And finally, unit test, which is important. You want to get your application tested before you push to production. And so, with all these modules shipped with Kohana, really, you know, it's a way to help you to bootstrap your application. So, if you don't want to build any of these yourself, they're readily available. If you download Kohana right now, these comes with the package. All right, so more about modules. The Kohana module system is designed to make modules very, very portable. So you can't design at any level in a cascading system, but if you really look into Kohana's code base, if you download it, you start looking at a system level, you start looking at an application level, maybe not so much at application, but if you look at the system level and you look at the module level, each of the components that's included has the very same design. It's basically a module. Even the core of Kohana is built upon that. So in fact, yeah, so as I mentioned, in fact, all Kohana native features and components are built as modules. And Croc.com's codebase currently share quite a few modules with other properties at Demand Media. For example, eHow has built a really awesome masher tool to mash to minify all the JavaScript and the CSS files. So we found that extremely useful, and we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so all we did is take the module, copy, paste, add it to Bootstrap, done. So we didn't have to do any other things other than just that. So now we'll get to minions. Oh yeah. All right, so minions, what are they? CLI script made really simple. Anyone know what CLI is? Command line interface.
Well, that's CLI.
So how many people have to write cron jobs? Write scripts to run as cron jobs? So yeah, exactly. Yay, you know, there's you know, it's nice to have cron jobs, but at the same time, it's kind of tedious sometimes to write them. So Kohana actually ships with a module called Minion. It makes it really simple for you to write CLI scripts. So here's an example over there. So basically, with a few lines of code, you can actually have a executable a CLI script that's executable on a command line. And what's really nice about it is everything that Kohana bootstraps, including all the modules that you have written, including the system, like application, and all the modules, are accessible in your Minion task. So you don't have to do all the crazy includes. You don't have to do all the you don't have to do your own autoloader. treat it as just another module or another class that you define inside of your module. So here's an example that I hope I didn't mess it up. Okay, so here's a quick example that I put together as a minion. So I created a task LA-PHP. So the first thing, the options. So now I can define what kind of options I want to take from the command line. So I'm sorry for the purple color. That's what Emacs decided to do. So the options, I currently have two different options set up. There's T and I. So in the command lines, if I run this on a command line, that's the only two options that I can accept. If any other options that are actually passing through the command line, it will just get ignored. So you can predefine a list of options that you want to accept. The execute method basically takes all the parameters that's passing in the command line, on the command line, and then you can use it however you want and then execute whatever you want. And then finally, there's another one called the build validation. This is overriding the build validation method in minion task, which is the parent class. What's nice about this is actually building with, as we talked about the validation. Here you can validate all the options that's being passed in the command line using the very same technology of the validation class. So here, I made an example of LA-PHP, and it has a static function called awesome and just prints out banana. And this is how we run it. So you basically say minion specify your task and passing all your parameters, and boom. So what we did here is that we print out the values of two parameters that we passed in, and also ran that static method awesome, and that prints out banana. So what if we actually pass in the I as a string? So just something random. Boom, it's going to go parameter error, I must be a numeric. So all of those things are basically taken care of for you. You don't have to do all of those yourself. So that's why it's really powerful to use the minions. It makes your writing cron jobs and everything so much easier.
Do the minions have?
So the minions have a time-based feature as well, so you can have them run periodically. Is that built into the minion function?
There is a minion daemon that you can use that's shipped with the minion that you can optionally use to time your stuff. But for the most part, on crack.com, what we do is we just use them as a way of quickly creating cron jobs or putting together cron jobs.
So you have real good old-fashioned cron jobs running minion commands to do processes within Kohana.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, if you actually, what's interesting, actually, I should actually show you guys. So in the minion script, if we cat it out, you can see all it does is just include the index.php, which basically, let me highlight that if people can see this. So all it does is just include index.php, which bootstraps Kohana altogether, and from there, all your PHP scripts, all your modules, everything is accessible. You can call them directly. All right, so let's move on. And all right, setting up Kohana. So now we get to how to get it up and running on your site. So all you need to do, upload the Kohana that you downloaded to your server, and then just browse through your domain and pass to Kohana and follow the instructions, and you're done. So it's going to probably ask a few things like, oh, is your cache directory writable? Is your logs directory writable? And so on and so forth. And it's going to also tell you if certain PHP modules is missing and you need to go install them. And once you're done, you're done. And then here's a screenshot of setting up Kohana. Once you're done, it just asks you to remove the install.php, and that's pretty common across all of the frameworks out there. It tells you to you can rename install.php, but I highly recommend just delete it. There's no need to keep it around. All right, so now let's talk about crack.com, and then we'll get into how crack.com is currently using Kohana. As earlier I've mentioned, #1 comedy in the United States per ComScore as of March of 2014. So some of the content that we run, here's some examples of it if you're not familiar. There's 6 deleted scenes that totally change classic movies, 6 shocking children abuses of power by airport employees. Ugh. Okay. All right. So yeah, as you can see, we run a lot of these titles. Sometimes you go, ugh, and sometimes, huh, that's funny, that's interesting. So a lot of contents, some of them are really funny, some are very educational. So that's how we have a very loyal based readers that comes in every single day. And currently we have about 15 million page views per day, and about 11 million monthly unique visitors. And so the whole crack.com is actually built on LAMP plus Kohana, LAMP meaning Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and also we run Redis as our caching layer. And we have a lot of read and write volume, so because not only do we present the content, but there's also a lot of commenting, which is a huge part of our site, which is the community. So there's a lot of reads and writes. So to do that, so we chose Kohana, and this is how we use Kohana. So one of the first thing when we first used Kohana, open up the Kohana package, what we realized is all the application and module and system folders are pretty much sitting at the same place as Word index.php. One of the thought that we had is probably because they want people, people that has, let's say, shared hosting accounts to be able to install Kohana. So for us, we didn't feel very comfortable with all these major components of the framework sitting at the same level as index.php, basically exposing on the docs. So we moved them out of the public accessing folder. And then what we also did is we moved all the third-party modules, including Kohana's default modules, into vModules folder, so vendor modules. So this is what it looks like on our site, what the folder structure looks like. We have the docs folder, which contains index.php. But application module system and vModules are kept outside of the docs folder. So the reason that we move all the Kohana module into vModules is we want to implement our own modules. We don't want to end up looking at a directory with everything mixed up. So it's for the sake of folder structure, making it readable. And each section of the site is kept in its own module. So we have article module, we have blog module, quick fix module, so on and so forth. And base classes are kept in application. So we do have cookie implementation. We have our own implementation of the Kohana core, making a few changes to the core. But we never edited the system level core. We all kept it in the application layer. Any extension or wrapper classes to Kohana system level classes are kept in application layer. So we recently upgraded from 3.2 to 3.3.1, and all we did was just changing the system folder, upgrading that. Scalability of Kohana Framework. All right, here's the interesting part. So one of the things about cascading file system is that it's really awesome, but it's very taxing on high traffic sites. If you think about it, it has to scan levels of folders in order to find the right file to load your class, right? Now, if you're in a production, you can immediately think, oh, that's an I/O bottleneck. It's going to keep doing all these lookups on my file system. What do I do? So in a lot of frameworks, they provide a caching ability for all these lookups. Kohana provides that as well, but on crack.com, or in fact, at Demand Media, I'm pretty sure all the Kohana implementation uses this, which is we actually pre-cache the file lookup as part of the production release scripts. And this will dramatically increase the performance. Now, the reason that we don't do the real-time caching is because we have so much traffic. If we actually push the code to production, let's say we have 10 servers, just making up a number, and you put your Kohana, your code base on these 10 servers, and we start taking traffic. Initially, since there is no caching, it's going to keep trying to cache, and what you get is you have all these servers basically start getting like high amounts of IOs, and who knows what's going to happen. It could actually eventually just kill itself, right? So if we actually pre-cache all of these lookups during our production code releases, then that wouldn't happen. It only takes a fraction of a second to run, so it's something that I highly recommend if you're going to use Kohana in your production environment, do that. And it's fairly simple method that we implemented called generate find file cache. Basically, this is a re-implementation of what Kohana already has. And then general scalability, well, Kohana and LAMP, right? So as a framework, as you keep scaling with the site that you're scaling, eventually you're going to run into, the framework is doing what it's supposed to do. What's really bottlenecking you is your own implementation. So there's common practice like use opcode caching like APC. Which is extremely powerful and simple to do. Basically pre-compiles all your PHP scripts, makes the performance better. I'm sorry.
Makes the opcode cache so the PHP compilation.
Yeah. Yeah. So it doesn't have to do the compile and then translate it to how the machine understands. So next, use cache, but don't overdo it. This is a common problem that we've seen before, which is, you're like, cache is great. I'm going to start caching everything. Everything I request is going to be coming from cache. Well, what's going to happen is if you make lots and lots of small cache calls, what you end up with is too many you're opening too many connections to the cache server. You either kill the cache server, or in our case, at one point, we literally killed our own server because we maxed out the TCP connection. So that's definitely use cache, but don't overdo it. Profile your code before you do your production release. Kohana has the code bench module that you can use to benchmark your code, and you can go beyond like xhprof. You can use xdebug. There's a bunch of tools out there that you can use to profile your code to figure out like where your bottlenecks is. Remove any unused modules in Kohana, or take it out of bootstrap.php. This will reduce the cascading file system lookup. So if you don't need a specific module, don't keep it in the bootstrap, right? Because with the file cache of cascading file system, it will do the lookup of those modules even if you don't use it. I mean, we are caching them, but why keep it there when you don't need it? Especially if you have init.php in that module that does some kind of initialization, it's unnecessary, right? Because you don't use it. And finally, minify and mash your JavaScript and CSS files. I'm sure a lot of you guys understand why that's important, because the smaller the file to download to the browser, the faster the page will render. So that's pretty much a general coverage of Kohana Framework. I hope I'm not going too fast. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We have all the demand media people here, and most of us has some experience with Kohana, and you're welcome to ask questions. And please, if there's any pizzas, attack it.
It's interesting that there's the validation feature. Does that minimize the amount of security stuff? Can you talk about any security issues in the Kohana framework?
Okay, so it doesn't really necessarily minimize your security, your code base's security need, because ultimately, it's still up to you as developers to be very careful of what you're accepting. What the validation module is doing for you is just a convenient way of chaining a bunch of validation rules together instead of writing endless if and else that it's not readable. Exactly. Well, if you have that many if and else, it's not readable.
But have there been many InfoSec issues in core itself?
Not that we've heard of.
You would know.
Yeah, we would know right away. Yeah, on crack.com, one of the things, one of the projects we're working on, we literally codenamed it as Iron Curtain, just trying to tie down everything that we can. And one of the things that we don't worry about is Kohana itself, because everything relies on our own modules, how we implement it. Yeah, so. Questions?
More questions?
You talked about your file and folder structure and you move it around. What if you change your mind later on and move them around again? What happens to the issue of updating all the links that are here and there?
Sure. That's a good question. So in Kohana, if you start moving things around, it's not really that big of a problem. Let's say in the system folder, you probably don't want to move the modules from the system folders to somewhere else, because that will actually break a lot of things. then you will have to modify literally the core of Kohana to really make to make that work, and it's it's unnecessary in that sense. But if you really want to move things around, you could. If I change my mind, all I need to do. Sorry, let me just show you guys. So in index.php at the very top, this is where you actually define all of your, the core components of Kohana Framework and where they live. So application module, V module, system, and over here we overridden it with, the root constant, which points at where system, application, and everything lives. So if we ever need to move it somewhere else, all we need to do is right here, just a couple lines of code or 4 lines of code, and we're pretty much moved it to another directory if we need it.
Yeah, and he has the inclusion order as well, so it looks in application and modules and V modules, right, and system, yeah. So kind of. We'll look for your files. I have kind of actually my own question. So, like, first of all, what PHP version you're using on your and yeah, well, let's start with that. Sure.
So one of the initiatives that we were trying to achieve here is we want to put crack.com onto AWS, and we made the decision of running on CentOS 6.5 and PHP version 5.5, so which is one of the latest version. We did run into one little caveat running PHP 5.5 on CentOS because CentOS core dev team decided that the JSON support has licensing issues, so it kind of dropped the PHP JSON support, so you kind of have to install it as a separate package. But other than that, we didn't really run into a lot of issues with PHP 5.5. It's just kind of very natural transition for us.
More questions? I have another kind of more, like, not as much of a Kohana question, but how do you guys build your deployment process? Do you use any continuous integration tools? Do you have task code coverage and stuff? So.
Okay, so on Cracked, unfortunately, we're not using continuous integration, but I believe eHow has some kind of implementation around that. But for Cracked, our release process is that we do have a, we do have staging environment, and we use Git for our repository. You don't want to fly blind. So what we do is, for every release, everything goes to staging. It needs to be tested, and then we also have a pre-prod environment. So pre-prod meaning pre-production, so it connects to the same database and cache server as the production server. It's basically a shadow server, and on there, that's when we do our final validation, and the business owner will check off on everything that we've built, and before we put it into production. And when we put it into the production, there's a process, and there's our QA will run through their sanity checklist. We also have automated tests that gets run on our site across through all the pages, making sure all the ads are at the right place, all the Facebook OG tags are at the right place, and with the right value and all that. So.
The automated test is some kind of browser side, or?
It's actually a little bit both. There's we have a really cool product that we built in-house that's built using Python. Basically, it basically crawls through this. It's a crawler that crawls through the site with a very specific, set of URL, or it can crawl the entire site if we wanted to, and then it could do, it could simulate like a user interaction using kind of Selenium, and it also can do executing JavaScript. So if we have a slideshow, it can actually paginate through all the slides, making sure all the JavaScript calls are being fired, all the pixel calls are being fired, and at the end of it, we get a very nice report of this build has passed, and it's green. If it's red, we have a problem.
Do you use the built-in Kohana unit testing in Cracked? Is that integrated, or is it all just external tools?
So we actually don't use the unit test module that's built in Kohana. When I joined, the team, it was something already built and something that we kind of inherited, and it works. So if it works, ain't broken, why fix it, right? But not necessarily saying that whatever that we're using is top notch, but since it works, it's not really on the highest priority of things to do yet.
And you weren't using the internal stuff because there was no problem with it. You already had something.
Exactly.
All righty. Any more questions?